It's tournament time. No, it's not March yet, but we're ready for 10 of the most exciting days in the non-conference schedule. It is almost feast week, baby.
Yeah, Tennessee, Texas, Vanderbilt, and LSU all have huge tournament challenges ahead of them this week. We'll break it down for you. Plus, Alabama has a big bounce back opportunity ahead coming against another Big Ten opponent this week. Will the Tide roll against Illinois?
And 8 SEC teams, including Kentucky and Arkansas, currently meet a major threshold that has helped determine who is most likely to go to the Final Four. We're talking about all that and more today on the Hoop Southbound Show.
Maddie, this was a great week of basketball. There was a ton of stuff that happened, huge games, and I really feel like we got to get the show started by visiting the Rebound and start about what happened on Tuesday night. Kentucky, the energy, the excitement, the pure joy. How do you not like His Holiness the Pope drop kicking a bunch of devils? First off, call the upset. I'm just saying. Second, Duke. And third, what a win for Big Blue Nation at the Champions Classic, beating Duke in this one. Signature win. They haven't done that in quite a while, but the Wildcats beat Duke 77-72. Maddie, what were your thoughts on this game?
So my thoughts, I was watching this game, kind of thought Duke had it in the bag. Was like, you know what, I'm gonna go finish the rest of it in bed because I have an old lady schedule and I was about to fall asleep. Fell asleep, woke up to the news that Kentucky beat Duke. So I had to spend the following evening catching up on the second half to see what in the world happened. And really what in the world happened was Mark Pope can coach.
Yeah.
Like this was a, great divisive plan from Pope. Kind of pointing out some of those weaknesses that Duke has, especially being reliant on a freshman. I mean,
Yep.
Cooper Flag is phenomenal, but as we always say, freshmen go freshmen. And he made sure that happened and he took charge of it.
It was like a weird mirror being held up to Kentucky fans' faces because like we had said that so much on this show about Kentucky and it's like the over reliance on freshman talent. And then watching Cooper Flag in that moment, like every time we've said freshman gonna freshman, like it's been in reference to Kentucky and Cal's one and done system. Here it is. Kentucky's on the other side of that now with like these super experienced, talented players who are, not as going to be as not as going to be as remarked about in the NBA draft, but they're going to see like these guys have that experience and it's going to show up at times. And these guys have enough talent to maybe be an NBA free agent or a late second round draft pick. There's a lot of these guys on that team. So it really, really worked out for them. And like I said, I think for Kentucky fans, if you've listened to this show for a while, you got tired of us saying freshman gonna freshman. But it's got to be kind of nice to see it happen to somebody else, because that was been our biggest complaint about, Cal's operation of Kentucky for the last several years. In this game, though, let's talk about it. I sent out a tweet during this game. Kentucky's offense is playing well enough to win this basketball game. And they were. Kentucky hit 10 3-point field goals made on 25 attempts on this game. It was an incredible performance from Andrew Carr, 17 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. He was +9 in this game, and a bunch of other stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. And then Atego Away was also solid with 15 points, 6 rebounds, and a great late steal that put this game away. Really, the game played out a lot like I kind of started seeing in my mind and why I picked Kentucky in this upset. And a game like this early in the season, players who have been there tend to play like they've been there in big situations before. And Kentucky's loaded with grads and juniors and seniors on this team, guys who have been there. And then what's Duke do? Duke's got an incredibly talented basketball team. Cooper Flag played exceptional basketball for about 38 minutes in this game. He had a double-double, 26 points and 12 rebounds. But you put the ball in his hand late in this game, and he turns it over not once, but twice with the game on the line. He turned that ball over. And for Kentucky, like I said, that's what we've been talking about. That's what we've been talking about for a long time, and the reliance in that. Like I said, there is a correlation to how this works sometimes. It's not just about the talent that you have on your team. It's about the experience too. And Mark Pope's roster that he has put together gives Kentucky, this is the most excited I've been about a Kentucky roster in a long time. Like this is the best roster I've seen them put together. That's why I've been excited, and we've been talking about like, yeah, I've got them picked right in the middle of the pack when it comes time for SEC play. That's because there's a lot of other experienced teams out there too, but like they've got a very high ceiling, and we saw that ceiling. We saw really how high this team can fly because they can play with some of the most talented rosters in basketball because they have talented guys who maybe not are going to have that NBA level like talk going on about them, but they're talented and they're experienced. And that's a dangerous combination. I loved this game all the way around for Kentucky. I really liked it. And this was an excellent performance from Mark Pope. And I gotta love the fact that, he definitely won some hearts over with Big Blue Nation saying this is for Big Blue Nation. This has got nothing to do with me at the end of this game.
Yeah, excellent performance, like you said. Fantastic performance by the team, by the coach. Just a big win for Kentucky all the way around.
It really was. Well, the Tide also came crashing in for a huge basketball game on Friday night. First big opportunity of the year against Purdue with their trip to Indiana. It also results with their first loss of the season, 87 to 778. Maddie, what were you feeling about this Alabama game that happened on Friday night there in the Mackey?
Yeah, so I think the biggest point to take away, a guy that you've talked about relentlessly on this podcast, Cliff Amari, the biggest difference maker in this Bama basketball team. This game kind of showed us that he needs to learn how to manage fouls, or this team may be in big trouble. The Boilermakers went on a 13-0 run after he was benched due to foul trouble. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest things. And then foul trouble in general. We talked about Amari experiencing foul trouble, but LeBaron Filan also experienced foul trouble after providing kind of the offensive jump for this Tide team because we saw in this game Mark Sears kind of take a back seat. He wasn't as productive as we're used to seeing him. And I think that's going to be something that they're going to have to figure out going forward. These teams are going to come attack Mark Sears, probably a lot of double teams. You got to figure out how to work around that because you can't win a basketball game with just one guy.
Yeah, and let's be fair. I'm 100% with you because those are points that I've got sitting here in my notes as well. Alabama is a significantly better basketball team when Amori's on the floor. He is a glue guy for how this team is going to operate, and you need his presence there because he is a good defender and he is somebody who gives you that presence you need at that number 5 spot there in the front court. But you're right. The Mark Sears point is very valid. I mean, in this game, you've got Braden Smith, who is the preseason Big Ten Player of the Year, going head to head with Mark Sears, who is the SEC preseason Player of the Year. Like that's the matchup everybody wants to see. But huge advantage for Braden Smith. He's got his home crowd behind him in this game. Mark Sears is playing in a building he's never shot in before. Like that makes a difference in a basketball game of this caliber. And credit to Nate Oates for going on the road, by the way, for facing this kind of competition in early November on the road. That's a tough ask. But you're right. They've got to figure out other ways to make things work. They've got to make sure they stay out of foul trouble. This is a big learning moment for Alabama, and I still think this is a really, really good Alabama team overall. I'm not going to be super critical on Alabama either. You hit a lot of the points, but there's one more thing I really want to point out in this game. I was a little concerned about the way Alabama handled their late game situation in this one with about 5 minutes to go. I think that's an area that Nate Oates needs to get better at and teach his players how to handle better as well. They kind of look clueless on who and when to foul there in late in the game and to extend the basketball game. And Oates was late to call that timeout to kind of fix it. It was getting late in there. I was like, man, you should have called this timeout 2 possessions ago. And I think that's something Alabama's going to have to work in their film session, talk about it as a team, and make sure that they completely understand. Another big point I want to make, LeBaron Filan fouled out of this game, but he actually played pretty darn well, all things considered. There was a moment in this game where it really looked like Cliff Amori and LeBaron Filan were going to be the difference makers for the Tide, but they both found themselves in foul problems late. So I just want to point that out. We were looking for a player who was going to step up on this Alabama youth here in this game, and really LeBaron Filan, excellent performance. What did you think of LeBaron Filan?
I mean, like I said, I think he had a fantastic performance. Like you said, fouled out. He's got to figure out how not to get in foul trouble because it's very obvious his team is going to be pretty reliant on him. But he's one of those guys that came in and had a phenomenal performance for a young player. Showed us that he's got some high basketball IQ, going to be able to make some plays. Um, as a freshman that, usually you may not get out of a freshman in these type of games. And I think that foul trouble is where that came in. in our freshman get a freshman saying.
Yeah, and I will say this. The way that he played in this game bodes well for him moving forward when he goes on SEC competition and goes into environments like that on the road. Because let me tell you, Mackey's a heck of a place to play. So is Neville. So is Bud Walton Arena. So is Rep Arena. But he's got a taste of that now. And hopefully, like, we still see him have huge performances like this, but manages those fouls overall. One more thing, Alabama also didn't quite shoot as well as we're used to seeing them shoot. They had some 3-point field goals made. They had as many 3-point field goals made as Purdue, but Purdue was much more selective with their threes, and Purdue showed a much wider variety of their shots. I know that's not how Alabama plays, but they've got to be more efficient from three if they're not going to play that style. Otherwise, you're going to have trouble with teams like UConn and Purdue and these teams in these situations who are willing to take that shot off the elbow and can hit it effectively from there. And I mean, does it surprise anybody that Alabama didn't take a single shot off the elbow all night? Moneyball or efficiency or analytics or whatever you want to call the thing is about getting things down to a single number of value, and there's multiple ways of getting in there. But if your style is three and paint, and you got to be better from three in this game because 0.93 points per shot behind the arc is not going to cut it. You have to be more effective. You have to figure out how you're going to sink those threes. Learning moment for them. They'll be better. Oates is a good coach. Still got a lot of hope in this Alabama team. This was a big ask, and they played pretty darn well. There's just areas of improvement that the Tide are going to have to go through to get to their goals, and they can do it. That's just my big takeaway in this one. Another game you might have not caught this week that was a really good win. LSU beats Kansas State on the road. Kansas State brought in a bunch of talent out of the portal this offseason, including Coleman Hawkins and Akora Core. But LSU played an excellent game and dominated this one from start to finish for the most part. Tigers win 76-65. Score was a little closer than what the game actually was. Cam Carter went off against his old team for 20 points. And then there was another huge game that happened on Friday night right after that Alabama-Purdue game. Maddie, you want to talk about Texas A&M and Ohio State?
Yeah, so another big win this weekend was Texas A&M beating Ohio State on Friday night, 78-60 for a huge night for the Aggies and Wade Taylor. Definitely a win that was needed after a little bit of trouble in the first couple of games of the season. Maybe we're starting to see this team gel a little bit more, kind of figure out those issues that they were having at the beginning of the season and maybe make that turn where people thought that they were going to be more dangerous.
Yeah, and we talked about it last week. Ohio State has front court problems. We kind of pointed it out. We started identifying it in that Texas game, and we said if Texas A&M can force Ohio State to make some twos, the front court will win this game for Texas A&M. The front court, I thought, for Texas A&M didn't even play their best, and they still managed to hold Ohio State to like 13.3% from two in that first half. It made a huge difference in this game, just how much better Texas A&M is at rebounding the basketball and putting points back up. That to me was a big difference in this game, is that presence in the interior Texas A&M was much better at. Wade Taylor, like you said, put up 15 points in this game, but Farrell Payne is going to be a big plus for this front court for Texas A&M going forward. I thought he played sensational, showed us a lot of good moments in this one. But yeah, I love the win for Texas A&M here. Big bounce back for that resume point. That UCF game is not going to hurt them, but it's nice to get that quad one game, or what looks to be a quad one game, here early in the season at home. Good resume point for the Aggies. All right, Maddie, let's talk about this week upcoming.
Yeah, so you mentioned kind of the turning point for Texas A&M. Let's look at another turning point. The Tide are coming off of their first hard test and first loss of the year, but this week they'll face another Big Ten opponent in hopes of grabbing a Q1 win for that resume. Big basketball game in the CM Newton Classic in Birmingham. Look, this is a revenge game for Alabama. They need a big comeback game here to get the fans back on board, get everybody back on board with the Tide. Illinois is in kind of a rebuild year, coming off a shaky win as well. Some of the names to know here, we got Will Riley, 17.7 points per game, 6 rebounds a game, 71.4% from the free throw line. So you talked about knowing who not to foul, not this guy.
Not this guy.
And then a name other SEC fans might be familiar with. We got another Avicic,
Yep.
but he plays for Illinois. Thomas Avicic, 17.3 points per game and 9 boards. So a big guy that they're going to have to watch in the paint. We talked about possible front court struggles, especially when it comes to defending. So that is another guy that they're going to need to watch. hardcore and make sure Amari doesn't get into foul trouble again this week.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll talk about those guys in a little bit. Those are two very important players there for Illinois. I got them in my notes as well. Yeah, Will Riley's a problem. Let's just go turn back on the off the court real fast. This is a new look Illinois team. That's nowhere the same team as last year. It's really kind of hard to project where Illinois is going to be in the Big Ten this year, but they're overall a good team. But for Illinois, this is going to be their first real test of the season, too. For Alabama, this is about getting that first good win of the year. Need to take these opportunities to get that top seed in March if you're Alabama here. It's not really a revenge game as much as it's just a bounce back game, in my opinion, for this one. But yeah, you talked about the front court, where I think Illinois is at their best, is in that front court. At the beginning of the year, the players that people were identifying to kind of watch on this team were Trey White, Ben Humricus, I believe is how you pronounce it, and then you mentioned him, Will Riley. Through those first three games, the most minutes were going to Will Riley and Humricus. Those guys are both averaging over 20 points per 40 minutes. And then you were talking about Big T. I'm calling him Big T because his brother plays for Arkansas, Big Z. He's turned in some solid minutes, and well, all three of those guys can help stretch the floor as well from Illinois and hit from three. In fact, Henricus and Riley are leading Illinois in 3-point field goals made with 3 per night to start the year. Really solid performance. The backcourt seems to be where the weakness is for Illinois. The guards haven't been super productive. Only Gibbs Lawhorn is averaging over 10 points a game. I think that's really where Alabama has a distinct advantage in this basketball game, because I think it's going to be a little bit more of a fight for them in the front court, but I think Alabama's guards have the ability to overwhelm even without Chris Youngblood in this one. Kind of your impressions on that, Maddie?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing here for Alabama is, like you said, lacking backcourt. And I think that's where Alabama obviously generally strives. So I
Yes.
think, you take the points from the game against Purdue and look at Alabama moving forward into this game. We're going to attack the backcourt. We're going to shoot a lot of 3-point shots. And then we're going to avoid getting into foul trouble. I think that's the big key points for Alabama when looking at this Illinois team.
Yeah, I agree. For Alabama to win this game, they're really going to need two things. First off, Cliff Amory's got to stay out of foul trouble. We talked about it there in the rebound. And you got to keep yourself available to counter Illinois' front court. The second thing Alabama is going to need is their guards to be more efficient from deep. Same thing we were talking about in the Purdue game. Illinois started this season 1.47 points per shot and 1.25 points per game. They've played effective here early in the year. Alabama's been a little bit lower than that. Granted, Alabama's played tougher competition in their first game so far. Still, Alabama's guards are going to need to make the shots count. LeBaron Filan, Aiden Holloway, those guys are going to be the difference in the backcourt in this game, because we know what we're going to get out of Terrell Wright, or get out of Wrightsell and Mark Sears, and we know what they can do. All right, so let's go ahead and go to our pick. Maddie, what's KenPom got this at?
Yeah, so KenPom has this game at 84-80, Alabama with a 65% confidence rate. I think KenPom might be right in this one. I think
Yeah.
we've got that dominant Alabama backcourt. Front court obviously made some strides, especially when you mentioned Cliff Amore. Just got to keep him out of foul trouble, and there won't
Yeah.
be any issues there.
I agree with you. I'm going Roll Tide in this one as well. I think Alabama comes out with a win on the CM Newton Classic. Let's go ahead and let's look at the rest of the action for this week. The first half of your week is a little lighter compared to the first 2 weeks of the season, but there's some tough mid-majors the SEC will face this week. On Monday, Arkansas takes on Pacific. Auburn takes on North Alabama. And then on Tuesday, Kentucky will face A-Sun favorite Lipscomb. Florida plays Florida A&M. Georgia will take on Alabama A&M, and LSU gets Charleston Southern. And then on Wednesday, Texas A&M will face Southern. Maddie, we're seeing something very interesting here early in the year. Last season, we talked about the massive improvements we saw on offense across the conference, across the board. Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, Florida all had extremely good offenses last year that ranked among the best in the country. It was a big improvement we saw for a conference that in the past has not had that kind of offensive production. It's been a little bit more bully ball in the SEC and getting offensive rebounds. But last year, we also pointed out the defenses overall were down compared to where they were in the past. Alabama, Kentucky, Arkansas, and Florida all had defenses that were far below the expectations we'd grown accustomed to seeing from them. Only 3 teams ranked in the top 40 defenses in KenPom last season. But here, early in the year, it looks like coaches have identified that problem on their rosters. The SEC has 8 teams, half the conference, in the top 40 defenses on KenPom, and 4 teams, Tennessee, Auburn, Arkansas, and Texas A&M, are in the top 20. All 4 of these teams have faced P5 competition. Auburn beat Houston in Houston there in the Toyota Center. Arkansas played Baylor and Dallas, and Texas A&M, they faced 2 teams so far, UCF on the road and then Ohio State at home. Maddie, who stood out to you on the defensive end so far the most?
So I'm gonna go with 2 teams here, one based off of improvement and one just based off of sheer confusion. So,
Mm-hmm.
going off of improvement, let's look at Alabama. I mean, that was my biggest concern going into the season was gonna be Alabama's defense. Obviously, front court issues from last season were kinda carried over and conscious in my mind, but you look at Cliff Amore, you look at some of these freshmen honestly have been a great defensive, barrier there for Alabama, and I mean, they've just shocked me, based off of the improvement early in the season. They've played great teams. They've had a couple of slip ups here and there, but based off of my, inclination on them at the beginning of the year, they're really impressing me as to where they are now. And I think they can continue to make some strides and continue to build that defensive power rest to kind of make them that team everybody thought they were going to be this season.
Yeah, and granted, their numbers slipped a little bit since that Purdue game. Purdue's a very efficient offense, but they were playing very, very well against some, good mid majors here to start the year. We'll probably see them bounce back a little bit in that Illinois game. But to me, the 2 things stood out to me on the improvement for Alabama. Cliff Amore, bringing him in. This team last year was, missing Charles Bediako to really round out this roster. Cliff Amore comes into this team, and I don't think it's a mistake that you're adding more rim protection and everything else. And then Alabama also added a coach out of the Detroit Pistons to help them out with a new assistant coach to help them out on the defensive side of the ball with the X's and O's. And I think that's really had some impact here early in the year and why we've seen this team step up on the defensive end. I like what Alabama's doing. Like I said, the question with Alabama this season is it going to be championship level? And that Purdue game bumped them out just a little bit of where they were, but they're still a really good defensive team. And I think they still could be much improved from what we saw last season. And let's be frank, anytime you're in the 100s on KenPom, there's a lot of room for improvement. So I think they could definitely be a better defensive team. Who's the other team that you wanted to point out?
The other team, call me a homer all you want, but I'm going
No,
to go.
I mean, no, honestly, they have. So, like, go ahead.
I mean, mainly because you look at Coach Cal, and historically, you have very offensive heavy teams. You have decent defenses, but when you look at kind of the Calipari system, you base your game off of offense.
Well, you're talking about the last
Defense.
5 years, though. The last
Yeah,
couple of years. Yeah.
yeah, last few years. But then you look at, this season, and the defense is what's held Arkansas in games that, made it possible for them to come back and, at least get closer to that Baylor game. You've
Figure
seen,
out that offense. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. You've had god awful 3-point shooting, which has led to the offense just being terrible. But what's kept them in this game is their defense and getting scores out of transition. So I mean, Arkansas probably one of the best defensive teams that I've witnessed so far this season.
They're very aggressive. Again, you don't have to call it homer because I think it's blatantly obvious, like how much better the defense is this year for Arkansas. They're diving for loose balls. These guys are fighting for every jump ball, stealing balls, hands in passing lanes, like very aggressive defense. And then you got, Big Z who's out there protecting the rim like crazy out there. And I don't think, like we pointed out in the preseason preview for Arkansas, I think there's an absolute correlation to, Cal when he had these championship level defenses at Kentucky, who was on staff. Kenny Payne was on staff and when they were having really good defenses there at Kentucky. Like, you don't have to be a great head coach to be a really good assistant coach. Those are 2 very different jobs. And I think Kenny Payne is a really good assistant coach and he's really helped with the bigs and improved things, for this coming season. So I think that's a big part of it. And then let's talk about the excitement that this team can get better on defense. Like, Jonas Adu is still limited right now. He's an excellent rim protector and a very good defender there in the paint. And it'll allow Big Z to move him over a little bit more into his natural spot as a 4 and someone who plays a hybrid 5 position when you have a true big in this team. And I think that's going to only help them a little bit more. Another team I want to point out, though, when it comes to who's really improved. Kentucky was horrible last year on defense. I mean, horrible on defense last year, which is funny because we're talking about how much better Cal's got this Arkansas team on defense and fixing the issues that he had there. Mark Pope has played much better on defense than anyone could have projected right now and through these first couple of games. I believe they're somewhere like in the 30s right now on KenPom when it comes to their defensive efficiency. That is not what anyone really expected. Mark Pope has never been that level on the defensive end. And I think it does have a lot to do with the experience of the players that he's having. He brought in some really good defenders on this team, like Lamont Butler and Atego Away are really good defenders. So's Andrew Carr. Those guys are making an impact early here in the year. And then that offensive system, we saw it leave like players on BYU out to dry every now and then in transition. And that was kind of more big worry about this is like, you got good defenders, but is this offensive position or this offensive style going to hurt you in transition? And it's really just kind of paid out right now. And I think it's because you do have experienced guys who acknowledge this. I don't know if Kentucky's going to stay here, but it's much better than what it was last year. And this is one of the better times that we've seen Mark Pope as a defensive coach so far. So I think he's finding a lot of success, and I'm really interested to see if that momentum carries over for Kentucky because that defense kept them going in that Duke game until the offense just really started going and put a ton of pressure on that Duke team late in that game in the Champions Classic. Really, really pleased with them. Maddie, any final thoughts on Kentucky before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right here. I think we expected, a full-on offensive game plan from Mark Pope to kind of just letting the defense shy away and relying on your offense. I think you hit the nail on the head. The experience is kind of what puts them there. You have those players that have been in those games in those situations before, and they're using their defense to, be able to win that game.
Absolutely. All right. And if you're wondering why we keep pointing out the top 40 and our segment there in the intro talking about this, the reason that we're keep talking about the top 40 in KenPom is there's only been a handful of teams. I believe it's 5 now. Alabama now holds the record with the worst defensive rating on KenPom to ever make the Final Four. Without being a top 40 team. So most teams who end up making the Final Four, one big thing you're looking for normally is a top 40 defense in KenPom. Half the conference currently checks that box here early in the year. Can't wait to revisit this later in the season, especially with those metrics get out of the KenPom system and give us just a little bit more of a clear picture. But like right now, obviously, coaches identified it and defenses have seemed to improved in the SEC this season.
It's not quite Peace Week yet, but it is the start of tournament time. No, not March Madness, but several SEC teams play in MTEs this weekend.
We're going to start in the Bahamas where the Tennessee Volunteers are playing the Bahamas Championship. The Volunteers have good win opportunities here. They're playing Virginia in the first round, and then they'll either face Baylor or Rick Pitino's St. John's team in round 2. Maddie, what are you thinking here?
I mean, I think this is an excellent opportunity for Tennessee. You've got some good teams with solid opportunities to get some points in the net. They lucked out with Virginia in their first contest. The Cavaliers kind of have a weak spot in that front court, which I think the Vols are going to be able to take heavy advantage of here and hopefully start this thing off with a win.
Yeah, they definitely have a really good opportunity to get a win here early in the season. This is very different than when we were previewing it in the preseason. Cavaliers are coming off that sudden retirement of Tony Bennett this offseason, really changed the outlook of the year right before the season started. But they got some guys who can play on this Virginia team. Isaac McNeely is a solid player and probably the most dangerous player in the backcourt for Virginia. Very efficient scorer. Of course, when you play Virginia, you know what you're going to face, a methodical and tough defensive team looking for efficient drives, kind of grinds you down offense. Tennessee is going to have to match that defense, which they certainly can, and try to speed Virginia up and make their shots count. Looking for guys like Chaz Lanier and Zakai Ziegler to be really in command of this game and lead Tennessee to a win and be just effective guards for Tennessee in this one. That's really how I think Tennessee wins this because I think they got the front court to win it. But they really need good guard play to be in control of this basketball game. What are your kind of thoughts?
Yeah. So with this Virginia team, KenPom has them taking the win 70-60 on that neutral floor. We aren't sure what happens after the Virginia game, but shows to be at least a solid start. And I think if you can get off to that good start, then you've got either St. John's or Baylor. Either team, I think, is going to be a good challenge for Tennessee. Especially, we saw Baylor play Arkansas. We saw, able to see kind of the downside of this Baylor team, if you will, and I think we can see Rick Barnes really taking advantage of some of those gaps that they have in their play.
Yeah, I think either opportunity on the other side of the bracket is a good one. Both these teams are projected tournament teams this year, so that should help you out in your resume and in the net. For St. John's, second year, Rick Pitino is the head coach there. Players you're going to want to know if you're a Tennessee fan is Kadary Richmond, a big time transfer this offseason in the portal. Maddie and I got to see him play Missouri last year in Kansas City. He's had a slower than expected start to the year, so we're all just kind of waiting for him to go off. But he's doing everything else he can do. He's facilitating. He's being a good backcourt rebounder. Just waiting for those points really to come along, and we'll see with a game where he finally just kind of explodes for the St. John's teams. And then some other team players you really need to know. Devion Smith and RJ Lewis have been really good here early in the season for St. John's. But if Tennessee doesn't win this MTE, I think it's Baylor's that got a legit shot. Now, yes, Baylor had that rough game to start the season out against Gonzaga, but they've bounced back well, and they've had they haven't shied away from competition here in November by no means. So they're getting tested here early, and they're getting tested often right now, and that's making them probably a better basketball team with every game. They got some guys to keep an eye on. Jeremy Roach, the Duke transfer, is a solid guard, and he's a very effective scorer, especially out of that 1 or 2 spot. And then Rob Wright is the number one true point guard coming out of this freshman class this year. And then the guy that's going to make highlight reels, VJ Edgecombe, is a top 5 prospect this year coming into this freshman class. Could be a lottery pick, highlight reel type of player when he gets going. We saw him play a much better game against Arkansas than what he did in Gonzaga and really showed us that potential. He can shoot. He can like athletic plays in transition. Really good player. Then Norchad Amir is going to be the big guy to watch. And I think that if Tennessee played Baylor in the second game, that's going to be an interesting matchup. Norchad Omier is a little undersized, but he's very efficient. He was part of that Miami Final Four team a few years ago, and he was a big part of it. He can do a lot of work down there and some damaging work as well. And then you get some really good shooters who are returning this Baylor team like Nunn and Lagway. This is a really tough team that Baylor is, and if the championship game is Baylor versus Tennessee, we're going to have some fun watching that one. And it's going to take some Tennessee players stepping up in this one to beat Baylor. They're a good basketball team. But if you pulled out the win, that's a huge resume point going in here in the early part of the season.
Yeah, for sure. I think if we get that Baylor Tennessee game, it is going to be a score fest. I think we're going to see a high 80s basketball game, um, and then see a very, you know, defensive heavy Tennessee team to try and get
Slow
this
them down.
Baylor
Yep.
team down.
Yep, for sure.
All
Let's
right, let's move on to Texas in the Legends Classic. Like Jay-Z said, at Brooklyn, we go hard. And the Texas Longhorns are going to be looking to be the champions in the Legends Classic in Brooklyn, New York. Texas will start the MTE out in game 1 against the Syracuse Orange. And then in game 2, they'll face either St. Joseph's Hawks or the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Looking into this first game, they've got the win over Syracuse at 85-74 at 81% out of KenPom.
Yeah, no, that's a good start. This is a very important tournament in my opinion for Texas. The Longhorns non-conference schedule is relatively weak. They didn't pick up that win they needed against Ohio State to get that resume started off right. And here they're getting a few chances to boost that resume. But there's a certain outcome that would be most beneficial to them. They may not like cheering for it, but kids don't like to eat their veggies either. And I also hope Tremont Mark gets back here soon for Texas. He's out indefinitely right now, but they really could use his defense and scoring ability to help this team go to a new level here. For Syracuse, we got to start the conversation out with J.J. Starling. Most important returner for this team this year. Here early in the season, Starling is the leader in 3-point field goals made. He's a very efficient scorer, and when he gets going, it's difficult to get him to stop. However, he leads this team also in fouls per game. Their key guys in the front court. This is going to pose the biggest problems to Texas. Chris Bell. Chris Bell is an athletic wing. He's an effective scorer. And then they got the Colorado transfer, Eddie Lampkin, who's a huge problem in the 5 spot, and he is a force in the paint. And then Davis is also a forward that is very effective in putting up points in a hurry. Texas has to find an answer in this game for the Syracuse front court. I think Texas is the more talented team when you look at the paper, but this is where the matchup problem is going to be at. So they've got to have Arthur Kaluma, and they got to have other guys step up in that front court. Shedrick's got to play a good game to make sure that you pull off this win, because Syracuse is not going to be beneficial to you if you lose against them in any way, shape, or form. We're talking about kind of a middle of the pack ACC team, but they've got a distinct opportunity here with the way that they play basketball. Maddie, what's kind of your thoughts on Syracuse?
Yeah, I think you look at Syracuse and their biggest concern here is their soft defense. I think the Longhorns can definitely take advantage of that. If they play some solid defense, which is our biggest concern with Texas. If they keep that 3-point game at bay for Syracuse, I think they'll have an opportunity to get away with the win here. But like you said, the front court concern with Texas, Chris Bell could definitely give them some trouble down low. So we're going to need the front court for Texas to have an excellent game. And I think that's where your worry kind of lies here in this game.
Yeah, I wish you had Tremont Mark back, because you could put Mark possibly on Chris Bell and have him defend from around front side the perimeter and deny those driving and cutting lanes against him. He's a good wing. And like I said, you're going to have to ask somebody to step up here for Texas. All right, so let's talk about game two here. This is the team Texas wants to face in round two. That's Texas Tech. The net's not out yet, but Texas Tech is highly ranked in KenPom right now and is likely a quad one game if Texas gets them. It would be a very good win if Texas could beat them. But again, this matchup has a problem for Texas in that front court. JT Toppin is a massive talent and one of the best forwards in the country. Right now, he ranks in the top 10 players in the country, according to Evan Mia. Also, you're going to have to look out for some of their guards like Chance McMillan in the backcourt, and he's very capable of putting points up by himself. But if Texas doesn't get Texas Tech, St. Joseph is still a pretty good team. The Hawks are supposed to be one of the better teams out of the Atlantic 10 this year. And then Xavier Brown is the player to watch for this team. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know how to pronounce an X and a Z next to each other. I'm sorry about that, everybody. But I believe it's pronounced Xavier Brown. Very capable scorer. He's accompanied by 3-point field goal leader Eric Reynolds in this backcourt. This is a really good backcourt team. But I think that's actually an opportunity that Texas matches up very well, because they have a great backcourt. So like the balance of the scale there, like St. Joseph being the less talented team and their strength being the same strength as Texas, that should be a very good cruising opportunity for Texas if they should face St. Joseph, and one that yields at least a decent result in the net. But obviously, if you're wanting to pick up a good win in November, Texas Tech would be the best outcome for Texas in this MTE, and one that you get to bounce back from that Ohio State victory and hopefully go 1-1 in your quad one category there here early in the season when the net comes out.
Yeah, I think you look at this game, everybody wants a Texas versus
I
Texas.
think that's the other side of it too, is that everybody wants the rivalry game.
Yeah, so I think if you get a rivalry game, it's going to be more fun. It's going to be obviously a little bit more heated because you've got the Texas on Texas school. So I think it even gives Texas a little bit better of a chance on edging out Tech here due to the fact that, they want to come back the Kings of Texas.
Yep. So Texas fans, if you want the best result for your resume, you might have to cheer for Texas Tech to win their first game against St. Joseph in this MTE. No one likes to eat their veggies. Let's go to our next one. Vanderbilt is hopping over to Charleston, South Carolina for what's the largest tournament we have this weekend in the SEC. It's the Shiners Children Charleston Classic. What's normally one of the crazier MTEs of the season this year should be no different. A lot of teams in this year's build are on bounce back years. They have new coaches, have master roster overhaul. It's difficult here to pick out a favorite really in this one. But in round one, Vanderbilt will face Nevada. In round two, the Commodores will either face Seton Hall out of the Big East or VCU out of the Atlantic 10. Then on the other side of the bracket, round three will either be Florida Atlantic, Oklahoma State, Drake, or Miami Hurricanes. Maddie, I don't want to go through every team since this is an 18 field here, but kind of what stands out to you? What are you thinking about here when you look at this bracket?
Yeah, I think you look just starting off with the first game, you've got Nevada. I think it's a very good matchup for Vanderbilt. Kind of one of those games I think we see them kind of on level playing field. But I think Vanderbilt does have the chance to win this game. What I would be worried about is some of those scorers that they brought in this season. With Nevada, you kind of got to look at some of their star players. You got Nick Davidson at forward, Chuck Bailey III as their number one guard, and then, a couple of different role players that can also produce on this Nevada team. Looking over KenPom, they've got Nevada actually winning this one, but I think the neutral court gives them a little bit of edge here for Vanderbilt. And I think, we've talked about it. I think Vanderbilt may be a little bit underrated. But when you look at Kim Palm, they kind of go off past history, and Vanderbilt's history hasn't been great. So
Yeah,
I think
there's
also
still data in there from the last previous couple of years for Vanderbilt as well, just like everybody else. I will say this. I would say okay. So looking at the bracket overall, I think the team to beat here is Miami. I think that would be my favorite. Most of the teams this field, like I said, are going through new or rebuild. Florida Atlantic longer has Dusty May as head coach. It's a new era for them. Drake's coach went over to West Virginia along with his son, Tucker DeVries. Oklahoma State is in the middle of a rebuild this season. Arkansas fans will remember Debo Davis on this OSU team. And then on Vanderbilt's side of the bracket, Seton Hall was a very good team last year. But a lot of what they had hit the portal, and it's a whole new day for them and what they're going to be. And then they might be able to get a good win along the way anyway, regardless if they face Seton Hall or VCU. VCU is a competitive team out of the Atlantic 10. The Rams could be an outside shot tournament team this year for an at-large bid, believe it or not just an automatic bid. Fun tournament, though, here overall. To me, there's a really good chance that we see Vanderbilt win 2 games in this MTE, regardless how the first game goes. I think they could beat Nevada. I think they could beat VCU if they got those games and those opportunities. Let's see how far Vanderbilt can go in this one, because this is a prove it to yourself moment and prove it to everybody else moment. Because, like, I really think, when you look at this game, Mark Byington has a chance here. He's a good coach. He's got talented players on this team. They can make some noise that no one's paying to and the computers aren't picking up yet. So for me, like, this is a really good, if you take 2 games here, if you're Vanderbilt, let's start talking about how high Vanderbilt's stock can rise this season. So, like, to me, really good opportunity in this field. They got some really good chances here.
Yeah, I like the chances here for Vanderbilt. Like you said, um, they're a team. All these teams are rebuilding. It seems
Yeah.
you got a couple exceptions, but it kind of almost makes the playing field a little bit more favorable than what we probably would have thought if we looked at this bracket at the end of last season. So I think it's going to be a toss up. I think it's going to be a fun tournament that kind of gives you a lot of
The potential for chaos is there. The
yep,
potential for chaos is there in this bracket.
100%. Well, it would be almost heaven if LSU could pull out a championship in West Virginia.
I
LSU is
gave you all the song lyrics today in the intros today. You're welcome.
you really did. LSU is heading to the Greenbrier tip-off in the Mountain Division. Round 1, LSU will face the Pitt Panthers out of the ACC. In round 2, the Tigers will either face UCF out of the Big 12 or Wisconsin.
Yeah, this is a really good field of teams, honestly. LSU, if they play like they did against Kansas State, can make a good showing in this one. Pitt's a good basketball team that can push one, to be one of the better teams in the ACC this year. Pitt's got a group of guys who are going to have to step up over the course of this season for this team, including Zach Austin and Guillermo Diaz-Graham. Also, you got to look for Ishmael Leggett, very capable scorer for them. Pitt could be another good win if LSU pulls this out here. This is a capable Pitt team. So if LSU is shooting like they did in Kansas State, playing like they did in Kansas State, has Cam Carter pull up and play some big minutes for them, like LSU, I like the chances of at least taking one in this tournament here. Like they if they meet that level of intensity, so I like that. Any thoughts on the first game before we talk about this? What could be game two?
Yeah, I think you've got a point there. We saw a lot in that Kansas State game that we weren't expecting from
Nope.
LSU. Kansas State was one of those games that automatically marked down as a loss for LSU, kind of move on. You got some experience getting that play, and they shocked me.
Yeah.
We texted about it, and I was at a loss for words because I did not expect LSU to even have a chance in that game. I think Kim Palm is right there along with your thoughts against Pitt. They've got them down as a loss, but it's 77-74 and only a 39% confidence rate. So I think this is definitely a game that the Tigers could take home a win and at least, go 1-1 in this tournament if worst comes to worst.
One win would be huge for this resume because, like, honestly, every team in here yields a good win opportunity against either a quad one or quad two game, in all likelihood. The better resume game for game two would be Wisconsin because that would be a likely quad one chance. But after UCF's win over Texas A&M, they might be a quad one opponent or a really good quad two. I think Wisconsin should be the favorite in this tournament. For Wisconsin, look out for players like John Tanya, high end scorer for the Badgers in the backcourt, and then Nolan Winter, really good rebounder in the front court. For UCF, got to look out for guys like Jordan Ivy Curry, who can put up points in a hurry, and then Keyshawn Hall is somebody that puts up points and is a good backcourt rebounder as well there for UCF. Also, just cannot let them start getting on those streaks that Texas A&M let them get on there at home. So, tough team to play, but like every team you're playing, this is a power conference loaded tournament and should yield some pretty good resume results for whoever LSU ends up facing this one. Again, they go 1-1. That's a good result in this tournament. Well, if you're not in an MTE this year, why not make your own? That's kind of what the Georgia Bulldogs did this season. Instead of going to an MTE, they're traveling out to the Bahamas where they'll face a couple of Big East schools, one of which is already there. Let me explain. What Georgia has done is they've scheduled back-to-back games in the Bahamas against St. John's and Marquette, two Big East schools that are likely to make the NCAA tournament this year. Both games have the opportunity to be big resume boosters for Georgia. Additionally, they kind of put the games in the Bahamas because, well, St. John's was already going to be there for the Bahamas Championship. Now Marquette is also coming out to play Georgia as well. Here's how this is going to work. St. John's will play two games in Bahamar, and then they'll take a break on the 23rd. Then on the 23rd, Georgia is going to face Marquette, and then on the 24th, the Bulldogs will play Rick Pitino and St. John's. Creative scheduling idea to get some good games in for Mike White and whoever on the staff came up with this idea. Props to them. Maddie, let's talk about game one there against Marquette.
Yeah, so game one against Marquette, some of the players to look out for. You got Cam Jones, one of the best players in the Big East, averaging 24 points per game to start the year. Then David Joplin in the front court leads the Golden Eagles in rebounds and puts up 13.3 points per game. We've talked about how Georgia is an underrated team, but they're going to have to be able to prove themselves against some bigger teams like Marquette. And I think this is a good opportunity to do so. You've got a neutral floor. You've got, like I said, one of the best guards in the Big East to put some of these younger players up against and be able to, show out. Asa Newell's going to have a big game here. Blue Kane's going to have a big game. Some of those players that we talked about that are younger, so the sophomore and freshmen are going to be able to get a chance to kind of prove themselves here in the game like this.
Yeah, I don't like this game for Georgia against Marquette. It's a really good basketball team, and Shaka Smart doesn't use a lot of the portal like coaches nowadays. So he builds his teams over time the old school way. They've got a lot of chemistry. They know their roles. They've had experience in big games. This is a big ask for Georgia, despite their talent. Dogs are talented, but very, very young. You're going to need some guys like Silas DeMurray Jr. and Asa Newell to play well above their years. To pull this one out. This is a tough game for them. Like I said, I'm not a huge favorite of this one, but it's good experience for Georgia. KenPom's got this game 80-74, 29% in favor of Georgia on this one. Marquette being the winner on that percentage is what I'm saying. They've got them beating Georgia by 6. Maddie, who are you picking in this one?
I'm going to go Marquette. I think just the youth on Georgia's team isn't going to be able to hold up against a more experienced team like the Golden Eagles.
Yeah, this is a really good team and experienced team. I'm with you. I just don't like Georgia's chances in this one. It's just a little unfavorable to me. I'm going to go Marquette as well, but let's talk about this second game. You already heard us talk about St. John's in Tennessee in the Tennessee segment, but I definitely think this is a more favorable game for Georgia than Marquette. A lot more transfers for St. John's. Then you're going to be coming off playing in Baja Mar against some very good competition. Think of this as a game 3 in an MTE for St. John's. You get tired, you get worn out playing basketball for that much time. Just that's kind of how anaerobic to aerobic cardio kind of works. I think we talked about that a few years ago when we were talking about the Maui tournament. We said, like, for our viewers who want to experience that feeling, go run a 30-minute max out of gassers back and on back-to-back games, and then tell me how your performance and how you're feeling on day three. I promise you're not going to feel like the same player or the same athlete at that point. Georgia's going to have one less day of ball under their belt here in this one. This one feels like a toss-up to me. Georgia, the young, talented team with the more rest. St. John's is going to be the more experienced team, but talented with less rest. Maddie, what are you kind of thinking in this one? When you look at the KenPom score, KenPom has this one 80-73 going to St. John's at 28% for the Bulldogs' chances. What are you kind of feeling in this?
Like you said, I feel like this is the more favorable game to pick up a W here for the Bulldogs. And I think they might be able to take this one. Like you said, I think rest is going to be a big, big contribution here. That second day soreness, it gets you, it creeps up on you. So
It gets
St.
you.
John's going to
It's
get that one
everything.
day of rest and
Yep.
go back to it, and they are going to feel like
Here's the yeah, very good description and accurate description there as well. What I was going to say is that the computer on KenPom doesn't equate that human factor of the fact that you're playing so many games in a row, and that's why I'm like, this is kind of a toss up here. I can't believe we're both going for the upset here. I'm going to pick Georgia as well because I think they take one of these. They're going to beat either Marquette or St. John's. If they don't, they're going to get a lot of learning experience from it. But they've got a path here, and there's a really good opportunity here against St. John's to kind of fight back against the computer, if you will, in this one. Kind of show that no, 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 the computer's wrong. We got this one, and come away with a really good win this year. So I think this is a big opportunity here for them in November, and I like it. I'm going to go Georgia as well. One last game to talk about. Mississippi State heads to Dallas to face SMU out of, yeah, go get this, the ACC. Chance for a good win on the road. Maddie, what are your thoughts here about Mississippi State's chances facing the very much Atlantic coastal state of Texas and SMU, who plays in Dallas?
Yeah, so I think for Mississippi State, we look at kind of the keys to the game being it none other than Josh Hubbard to be able to outscore this team. Um, it's going to be a rebuild year for SMU. You've got new coach in Andy Enfield. He's got 7 transfers and 4 freshmen that he picked up to kind of build this new team. Major players you want to look at here: Chuck Harris. He's a major 3-point threat and great from the line. So don't foul that guy when you get in the and Kevin Miller, the transfer from Wake Forest, kind of looks to be the Robin to Harris's Batman. So I think, you get those two guys under control, especially on the defensive end of the floor, and Mississippi State has a chance to win this ball game.
Yeah, SMU has some really good guards. You pointed them out, Chuck Harris and Kevin Miller, like all the way around. They can impact this game. So far, 8 3-point field goals made per game on SMU, and then Harris is getting about 2.5 of those right now. So it's going to be kind of up to guys like Kanye Clary and Josh Hubbard, as you were saying, to kind of slow them down on the defensive side of the ball. That's really where I think this game is going to be won and lost, is how well does Mississippi State play defense in the backcourt in this one. SMU's defense isn't elite. I think Mississippi State is, so long as they don't get the can't shoot on the road bug. Bulldogs got a really good chance here to come away with some points and win this game. So KenPom has this game, when I look at it here, 79-77 at 59%. Probably the tightest game we're going to talk about here on this week. We are recording this before the Utah game, so for Mississippi State and Utah today. So just a heads up if something crazy happens. But Maddie, given current circumstances, I would go ahead and I'm going to pick Mississippi State here to pick up a pretty good road win here. That should either be a high end quad 2 or a low end quad 1 game here for the Bulldogs. What are you thinking?
Well, if things go the way that they normally go, Mississippi State definitely won't win this game because I'm also going to pick Mississippi State.
We
So
are about to set everybody up for failure this week
the unanimous decision
across the
confrontation that
board.
we always seem to have may bite us in the butt on this one, but I'm taking Mississippi State as well. I think, if Mississippi State can keep up their defense around the perimeter, I think it's an easy win for this team.
That's kind of how I'm feeling. I just think Mississippi State is the better team defensively. Right now, it's kind of year one there for Coach Enfield, and they've got some work to do to get this team where they want to go here and be competitive in the ACC for the future. Mississippi State is a little bit more complete team at this moment. I will say the one area of exposure for Mississippi State is still a question in the 5 spot there. But we'll see how that adapts over the rest of the season. But right now, definitely favor Mississippi State in this one. For the rest of the weekend, though, on Thursday, South Carolina faces Mercer. Ole Miss takes on Oral Roberts. Oklahoma plays East Texas A&M. By the way, that's Texas A&M Commerce. For anybody, they changed their identification as a school to East Texas A&M, so we'll call them that going forward. I was used to calling them Commerce. And then on Friday, Kentucky plays Jackson State. Florida will play Southern Illinois. Missouri faces Pacific. Arkansas takes on my mid-major spotlight team, Little Rock. And then on Sunday, Missouri plays UAPB, Arkansas Pine Bluff. All right. Huge week of basketball ahead. It's going to be a ton of fun. If you guys have not already, please like and subscribe to the Hoops Southbound Show. We greatly appreciate you guys hanging out with us today, talking hoops. It should be a fun week of basketball. Guys, again, please like and subscribe. Join us for the show. We'll have more content coming out throughout the week. And then next week, you can catch us every Sunday at 9 o'clock, 8 Central. So, guys, we'll see you guys again next time.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.
I don't know what the heck I was saying there. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.